How have you done it once again? All 10, except maybe that one that wasn't so fun. We don't like to talk about Polytechnique.
Wow, that was beautiful. First of all, I'd like to say that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, I've got to say that for me, the one really bad Denny movie, in my opinion, I know we don't share this opinion, but in my opinion, it's Maelstrom. But I really can't hate the man because he himself thought the movie was so bad that he stopped directing movies for 10 years after he made it. So, I mean, I just really have to respect him for that.
That's true. Really incredible overall. 10 movies, 8 really good movies.
Yeah, it is really incredible. I feel like he's maybe not given his due.
Yeah, I feel like any one of these for someone else, you'd be like, oh my God, they did that.
Yeah, I wonder if it's that like half of them are in French, that maybe just like people didn't start talking about him as early as they started talking about like Nolan or Fincher or the other guys I would consider his contemporaries.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible work. And like very fun to do on this podcast because there are so many themes and like recurring images that run through all of them.
Mm-hmm.
The man has been very clear about his obsessions from the beginning, and they remain the same for the most part.
Even all the way up through Dune, we're talking about moms. We're talking about chaos. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the grim realities of life.
There's even briefly a freaky spider in Dune.
I noticed that and hated it, but like loved it, you know.
Yeah, me too.
It's like, oh.
Me too.
I was like, ew, that's horrible, but awesome. I thought Dune, interestingly, low on creatures, which is also true in the book, but
yeah,
which is cool. It stays in line with like Arrival being like, you just see the aliens like you don't see them in all their form ever. Well, would you care to give the world your ranking for Denis Villeneuve?
Yeah, should I kick it off?
Yeah.
Okay, my ranking of Denis Villeneuve's 10 films so far. I've done these in categories of film quality.
Oh, whoa.
So we start in the bad. Number 10, Maelstrom. Now we're in the okay category. Number 9, Polytechnique. Number 8, Sicario. About Sicario, you know, must a movie be good? Must a movie have coherent plot lines and character arcs you can follow? Is it not enough to have Benicio del Toro in a live-action Metal Gear Solid 10-minute set piece, skulking through a house and killing women and children? Is that not enough? Okay, now we're in the good section. Number 7, August 32nd on Earth. Hey, Hollywood, I've got a really good pitch for an English language remake of August 32nd on Earth, so call me. It modernizes it and keeps the spirit of the original. That's all I'll say. You gotta pay me to say more. Number 6, Prisoners. This is where we get into best. This is where we get into best versus favorite for me. Because if this was a ranking of Denis' best movies, Prisoners would be at least 1, if not 2 higher. But since I'm doing favorite and it's just like a little dark and hard to parse out, it is at number 6. Number 5, Arrival. Number 4, Dune. Now we're up to, I would say, the incredible category. Number 3, Enemy. Enemy is a movie that feels weirdly like malevolent when I think about it. There is something like creepy and haunted and sinister about that movie that I think like works so well. I remember reading people in the 60s who read Rosemary's Baby like had to like throw out the book or burn the book because they felt like it was an actual evil entity in their house. And that's like kind of how I feel when I think back on Enemy. Number 2, Incendies. Number 1, Incendies in Space, Blade Runner 2049. Which I think are really his 2 masterpieces. And you can kind of like take your pick of if you prefer smaller drama, still on an epic scale, but like a very human scale in Incendies, or if you like sort of the long, slow sci-fi of Blade Runner. But I think they're both just like him at his most powerful, telling these sprawling stories of lost families and purpose in life. And that's my ranking. And man, what's yours?
Damn. I think we're similar in what we think the categories of movies are here, and just a little different in the overall ranking. So I've got it number 10. And I rank things just like by my experience of watching them and like which would I most like to watch again. So number 10, Polytechnique. Number 9, Sicario. Number 8, Maelstrom. Number 7, Prisoners, which is where I think they start getting good. But I also would not want to watch Prisoners again because it's so upsetting. Then I would go with August 32nd. Then Enemy, which I agree is an evil and cursed film. That's at what, number 5. Then I would go number 4, Arrival. Number 3, Dune.
Wow.
Number 2, Incendies. And number 1, Blade Runner 2049. I think that Blade Runner 2049 is the crowning achievement so far.
Yeah.
I think that Dune possibly will be as a 2-part movie, like when the 2 parts are taken together. But currently, as it stands, as like a single film, I think that both Incendies and Blade Runner are greater. But I think that Dune is a more beautiful and well-crafted film than Arrival is.
That's very surprising to me because I know how much you love Arrival.
Yeah, I love Arrival, and it gets me on an emotional level. I think Arrival gets me the most. But I think those other movies are like, their storytelling is stronger. So what's it all been about? Like, what are the just desserts for this Denis for 2?
Thinking about desserts, I want to ask, like, what do you want to see Denis do next? What feels like the next natural step? I mean, is it a lot more Dune movies? Is it something else completely?
Ooh, I think if they decide to do all 6 of the Frank Herbert books, which I think they should, then it should be Denis who does them all. I don't know that I would have him locked into that sort of like purgatory for the next 15 years of his life or whatever that would be.
More than that, I would guess.
Yeah, but I also feel like he would be the proper person to do it. And it would be risky if it started to be like, I feel like if it was multiple people, it could kind of like lose the flavor. Or how about you? What would you like to see from him?
I do want him to get to make Dune Part 2 because it seems like he really wants to. And I think he has some sort of a vision for it that I would like to see. I think he has very purposefully ended Dune Part 1 immediately before you get to the stuff that is both kind of problematic now and the stuff that is just hard to show on screen. Like, not messed up in any way, but just the stuff that is really hard to depict on screen.
All of that aside
Anyway, that is to say, I do want him Dune Part 2, but I also want to see him like still do some original stuff. And I think he does sci-fi really well, but I do still want to see like some stuff that's not sci-fi in the future again from him, is my opinion.
I would really like to see some more comedy from him, perhaps, or like flex those muscles again. Because I think there's some cool stuff that he plays with, but it felt a little clunky in Dune. So maybe he needs to like work on that some more. I
feel like there's always like 5 jokes he puts into each movie, and they normally do work for me. But it's sort of like, that's all you get. Except in Prisoners. Yeah. But I think all the rest have a couple jokes. I have wondered what it would be like to see him do a horror movie throughout this whole series.
Ooh.
I think I have decided that I just would not like to watch it.
I feel like Prisoners was his horror movie.
Yeah, his regular drama stuff is so dark and obsessive and brutal already that I don't feel like he could sort of make light of the horrors of the world in a way that a horror movie does.
Yeah, it would just be very realistic and bad. You know, another theme that I've sensed in his work is a love of deserts. I mean, that's there from the very beginning with
the
salt flats all the way through the Middle East, through Sicario and like the Mexican-Texas border, all the way through to Dune.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it is a little bit of like a dark journey of the mind. Spending three months as summer turns to fall watching all of these.
I'm really glad that I watched Prisoners at the height of summer when I was like at pretty much my happiest and just like hanging with fun people, because if I had waited until like when like the fall was coming on and the weather's getting rainier, it would have been a totally different story. Ditto Polytechnique.
Yeah, that's true. I am really glad that we did this series. Yeah, I want to thank you for choosing it, because I think it was really good. It's not, I feel like we were looking at like longer directors and maybe leaning towards Nolan, and then you said we should do this. And I feel like in the end, this was like a much more fulfilling and informative and varied and exciting journey than I feel like Nolan would have been.
Yeah, I definitely think it has been worth doing and interesting. I would wonder, like, what do you think we have learned from having watched this series, if anything? Or, like, what would you take away from it? Or, like, the strengths that you could emulate from his work?
Okay, well, I think on, like, a podcast level, these are definitely, like, some of the darkest movies we've covered. So I feel like we've learned how to sort of make the show more entertaining and consistent regardless of what the movie is we're covering. Like, that's definitely been something we've tried to do, is just, like, even if it's a bad movie, if it's a dark movie, if it's a great movie, like, how can we make the show sort of fun no matter what? In terms of artistically, what I'm really interested from him is like his clear hatred of dialogue, how so much of his movies convey so much with so little words. Like, there's no one else quite doing it like that. I think that he is someone who really, really trusts his audience and believes that his audience is smart enough to get it. Which it can be argued, like, maybe sometimes they aren't, but he always thinks that they are. Yeah. And I feel like we just need more people like that. Yeah. What about you? What have you really taken away from this?
I think he's like a really powerful example of like meditations on a theme, and like really teasing everything he can out of a few like concepts that obsess him. Either indulging or like expunging like his personal nightmares in some way, especially in the early movies, that like then allows him to go and create in like a very, I feel like, grounded and realistic way these much larger fantasy worlds later. And I'm interested in that. Denis Villeneuve, flop or bop?
A bop, for sure. I've grown really fond of him, and I'm really excited to see anything he wants to do in the future. I think he's one of the all-time greats.
For sure. I would 100% agree. Bop to old Denny, and anything he wants to get into next, especially if it's Dune related. Or, you know, like, I bet he could do a solid Moby Dick adaptation, you know, just like
some good call, honestly.
Weird thing. Like if they were like, oh, the next thing that Denis Villeneuve is doing is like Death Comes for the Archbishop or some like thing like that, I would be like, okay, all right, I see it, Denny. We see you. So, you know, like, don't be surprised. I foresee more deserts in his future. I foresee more mothers. I foresee more tortured familial relationships. And I see, through it all, the hand of chaos.
I would like for him to get a shot a single shot at like a big established franchise. I know he kind of did that in Blade Runner, but he knocked Blade Runner out of the park. But I know that he turned down directing No Time to Die to direct Dune.
Wow.
And on the Dune press tour, he's talked a little bit about wanting to do a James Bond movie. So maybe that. Him and Chloe Zhao also had this interview where they were both talking about how much they love Star Wars and how they like try and be very intellectual directors but like love Star Wars so much. I would like to see him get a shot at something like that. I think would be really cool. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, I hope that he gets to make a silent film.
That would be so cool.
The thing he's been talking about since like when he wanted to do Incendies as a silent film. Like, I hope that he eventually just does one somehow.
All that being said, next up, we are going to be having, Scream? Is it still Cinema Bum's Bumtoberfest?
Yes. As this comes out, there will be like 3 more days of Bumtober. So go vote for something nice and short.
Go vote for something, keep it spooky. And honestly, I hope you have a wonderful Halloween. May I just say, happy Halloween. I hope the Great Pumpkin treats you well. And to all, a good Christmas. And to all, a good night. Cinema Bums is a production of DKG Podcasts. It is created and produced by Wade Lawrence Holloman and me, Emmett Temple. Wade also edits and mixes the podcast. Our theme music is by Zane Holloman, who you can find on Bandcamp, and our show art is by Autumn Beckner. Our social media is managed by Laura Bennett. If you like what you hear, please tell all your friends and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, the 2 best ways to spread the word about our work. You can also follow us on Instagram @CinemaBums or email us at cinemabumspod@gmail.com. Don't flake on us. We'll be back next week.